It's mine!
No, it's mine!
Aria Sinclair had spent 3 years preparing to launch her fashion line at New York Fashion Week. But when she arrived at Lincoln Center to find her rival, Sebastian Cross, setting up in the show space directly across from hers, she realized that her biggest competition wasn't just professional anymore. The man who had stolen her design school scholarship, her internship, and her first job was now about to steal the spotlight from her debut collection, unless she could prove that sometimes the best rivalries were just love stories waiting to be discovered. Before we dive into Aria's high-stakes world of fashion, fierce competition, and unexpected romance, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us bring you more captivating romantic stories every week. Now, let's step into the glamorous and cutthroat world of New York Fashion Week, where passion and rivalry are about to collide in the most unexpected way. Aria Sinclair stood in the organized chaos of her Fashion Week preparation space, watching her team carefully steam the final pieces of her debut collection, while her heart raced with equal parts excitement and terror. At 28, she had worked tirelessly for 7 years to reach this moment, building her reputation as a freelance designer while secretly developing the collection that would either launch her career or confirm that she didn't belong in fashion's highest echelons. The Sinclair collection represented everything Aria believed fashion could be: sustainable luxury that celebrated both craftsmanship and innovation. Each piece had been designed with ethical production methods, using fabrics sourced from sustainable suppliers and created by artisans who were paid fair wages. Aria had invested not just her savings, but her entire philosophical approach to design in this collection. Aria's assistant, Maya, rushed over with news that would change everything about Fashion Week. Sebastian Cross, the designer whose career had seemed to shadow Aria's at every crucial moment, had secured the show space directly across from hers, in the same venue. This meant that their collections would be competing, not just for critical attention, but for the physical attention of buyers, editors, and influencers who might choose one show over another. Sebastian Cross had been Aria's nemesis since design school, though she wasn't entirely sure he was aware of the rivalry that had shaped so much of her professional motivation. They had been competing for the same prestigious scholarship their senior year, and Sebastian had won despite what Aria considered to be her superior portfolio. He had then landed the internship at Marchetti Milano that Aria had desperately wanted, followed by the assistant designer position at Vera Wang that had been her dream job. Every professional milestone that Sebastian achieved seemed to represent a path that had been closed to Aria, and she had spent years wondering whether his success was due to superior talent, better connections, or simply the advantages that seemed to come more easily to confident, charismatic men in the fashion industry. Now, as Aria prepared for the most important week of her career, Sebastian's proximity felt like both a challenge and an omen. She couldn't decide whether his presence would motivate her to excellence or distract her from the focus she needed to present her collection successfully. Aria's team worked through the night to ensure every detail of their presentation was perfect. The sustainable luxury concept required more explanation than traditional collections, and Aria had prepared detailed information about each piece's ethical production story for the buyers and press who attended the show. The morning of their setup date, Aria arrived early to oversee the installation of her temporary showroom. The space had been transformed into an environment that reflected her collection's values, with reclaimed wood displays, organic cotton draping, and information cards that told the story behind each garment's creation. Aria was adjusting a display when she heard a familiar voice from across the corridor that made her heart skip in a way she didn't want to analyze too carefully. Sebastian Cross was directing his own setup with the same attention to detail she remembered from school, but his presence seemed more commanding and confident than she recalled. When Sebastian noticed Arya across the hallway, his reaction was immediate recognition followed by what appeared to be genuine pleasure at seeing her. He approached with the easy confidence that had always made Arya simultaneously attracted to and irritated by him, greeting her as if they were old friends rather than competitors who hadn't spoken in 3 years. Sebastian complimented Arya's setup and expressed curiosity about her collection's concept, seeming genuinely interested in her sustainable luxury approach rather than dismissive of what some traditional designers considered a limiting gimmick. His questions were informed and thoughtful, suggesting that he had been following developments and sustainable fashion more closely than Arya might have expected. As they talked, Arya found herself remembering what she had always liked about Sebastian, despite their competitive relationship. He was intelligent, passionate about design, and had a way of discussing fashion that went beyond surface trends to underlying cultural and artistic significance. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Arya caught herself responding more warmly than she had intended. Sebastian mentioned that his own collection for this fashion week represented a departure from his previous work, incorporating more experimental techniques and sustainable materials. He seemed to be evolving as a designer in ways that might actually complement rather than compete with Arya's approach, though she wasn't sure whether this made their proximity more or less complicated. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sebastian's team, and Arya realized that she had been talking with her supposed rival for over 30 minutes without once thinking about competition or professional jealousy. Instead, she had been enjoying their discussion and finding herself impressed by Sebastian's growth as both a designer and a thinker. As they returned to their respective preparations, Arya found herself glancing across the corridor more frequently than she cared to admit. Sebastian worked with focused intensity, but he also took time to encourage his team members and ensure that everyone understood their roles in the presentation. His leadership style had matured significantly since design school, and Arya had to acknowledge that he had become not just a more successful designer, but apparently a better person as well. The first day of Fashion Week brought a steady stream of buyers, editors, and industry professionals to their section of Lincoln Center. Arya watched nervously as visitors moved between her space and Sebastian's, trying to gauge reactions and assess which collection was generating more interest. To Arya's surprise, several buyers made specific comments comparing her collection favorably to Sebastian's, noting that while both designers were working with sustainable concepts, Arya's execution seemed more authentic and comprehensive. These comments boosted Arya's confidence, while also making her more aware of Sebastian as a person rather than just a professional obstacle. During a quiet moment between buyer appointments, Sebastian appeared at Arya's display with 2 cups of coffee and a proposition that surprised her. He suggested that since they were both dealing with similar challenges in presenting sustainable fashion to sometimes skeptical audiences, they might benefit from sharing strategies and supporting each other rather than treating their proximity as pure competition. Sebastian's offer felt both generous and strategically smart, and Arya found herself accepting both the coffee and the collaboration. They spent 20 minutes discussing the questions they were getting from buyers, the resistance they encountered to higher price points justified by ethical production, and the ways they could frame their work to emphasize value rather than just virtue. The conversation revealed that Sebastian had been facing many of the same challenges that Arya had encountered in developing her collection. His path to sustainable fashion had been different from hers, motivated more by industry trends than personal philosophy. But his commitment to the approach seemed genuine and well-informed. As the week progressed, Arya and Sebastian fell into a routine of informal collaboration that benefited both their presentations. They shared information about buyer interests, coordinated their schedules to avoid conflicts that might split interested visitors' attention, and even began recommending each other's collections when visitors were specifically interested in sustainable fashion. The collaboration forced Arya to reconsider her assumptions about Sebastian and their supposed rivalry. She began to realize that much of their rivalry had been one-sided, existing more in her mind than in his behavior. Sebastian seemed to have always viewed her as a talented peer rather than a threat to be defeated. More troubling for Aria was the growing awareness that her attraction to Sebastian, which had been complicated by their supposed rivalry, was developing into something deeper now that she was getting to know him as a colleague and potential friend. Sebastian was not just handsome and successful, but also kind, thoughtful, and genuinely passionate about creating fashion that could make a positive impact on the world. The turning point in their relationship came on Wednesday evening, when a major fashion magazine editor who had been considering both collections asked to see them presented together, side by side, to better understand their different approaches to sustainable luxury. The request required Aria and Sebastian to coordinate their presentation in ways that would either highlight their compatibility or expose fundamental differences in their work. Working together to create a joint presentation revealed just how compatible their design philosophies had become. Sebastian's collection emphasized innovative techniques and experimental materials, while Aria's focused on traditional craftsmanship and ethical production, but both were committed to creating fashion that was beautiful, responsible, and commercially viable. The joint presentation was a success, with the magazine editor ultimately deciding to feature both collections in a major spread about the future of sustainable fashion. The article would position Aria and Sebastian as representative of a new generation of designers who were proving that ethical fashion could be both luxurious and profitable. After the successful presentation, Sebastian invited Aria to dinner to celebrate their mutual success and discuss potential future collaborations. The invitation felt clearly personal as well as professional, and Aria accepted with the awareness that their relationship was shifting from rivalry to something much more complex and promising. Dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Soho gave Aria and Sebastian their first opportunity to have an extended personal conversation without the distractions of Fashion Week chaos. Aria shared the story of her evolution towards sustainable fashion, admitting that her initial motivation had been market-driven, but that she had become genuinely committed to the ethical implications of her work. Sebastian also revealed that he had always been aware of Aria as a competitor and had actually been intimidated by her talent and dedication even when they were students. His success in winning scholarships and internships had been hard-fought and had often involved impressing evaluators who were comparing him directly to Aria's exceptional work. This revelation forced Aria to confront the possibility that she had misinterpreted much of their academic and professional history. Rather than being effortlessly successful at her expense, Sebastian had been working just as hard as she had and had been just as aware of their competition, though he had apparently viewed it as motivating rather than antagonistic. As they talked through their shared history, Aria and Sebastian began to understand how their rivalry had actually pushed both of them to achieve more than they might have individually. The competition that had felt so personal and sometimes painful to Aria had been a crucial factor in both their professional development and their current success. The conversation also revealed their compatibility on levels that had nothing to do with fashion. They shared similar values about work-life balance, family relationships, and the role that creativity should play in making the world better. Sebastian was thoughtful, funny, and genuinely interested in Aria's experiences and perspectives in ways that made her feel valued as a whole person, rather than just a professional contact. By the end of the evening, Aria had to acknowledge that she was falling for Sebastian in ways that had nothing to do with their rivalry and everything to do with who he had become as a person. The attraction that had been complicated by rivalry was now enhanced by respect, compatibility, and genuine affection. Sebastian's interest in Aria was equally clear, though he was careful to ensure that any romantic development between them wouldn't compromise their professional relationship or the collaborative success they had achieved during Fashion Week. He suggested that they take time to process the week's events and see how they felt about one another once the intensity of Fashion Week had passed. The final day of Fashion Week brought validation for both Aria and Sebastian's collections, with multiple buyers placing orders and several fashion publications scheduling follow-up features. The sustainable luxury concept that had been risky for both designers proved to be commercially viable as well as critically acclaimed. More importantly, the collaborative relationship that Aria and Sebastian had developed during the week had enhanced both their presentations and opened possibilities for future professional partnerships. Several buyers specifically mentioned the complementary nature of their collections and suggested that collaborative presentations might be an effective marketing strategy for both designers. As they packed up their installations at the end of Fashion Week, Aria and Sebastian made plans to continue their collaboration on upcoming projects. They had identified several opportunities where their different approaches to sustainable fashion could create synergy rather than competition, and both were excited about the creative possibilities of working together.
The personal relationship between Aria and Sebastian developed more slowly than their professional partnership, as both were cautious about mixing business success with romantic involvement. They began with casual dinners and art gallery visits, gradually building a friendship that felt separate from their work collaboration. Sebastian proved to be an attentive and thoughtful romantic partner, remembering details from their conversations and finding ways to support Aria's career goals without overstepping professional boundaries. He was secure enough in his own success that he could celebrate Aria's achievements without feeling threatened or competitive. Arya discovered that Sebastian's confidence, which had once intimidated her, was actually based on genuine competence and hard work rather than arrogance or privilege. He had faced challenges and setbacks in his career that had taught him resilience and humility, and he was genuinely committed to building a fashion career that would create positive change in the industry. 6 months after Fashion Week, Aria and Sebastian launched their first official collaboration, a limited edition collection that combined Aria's ethical production expertise with Sebastian's innovative design techniques. The collection was both a commercial success and a critical breakthrough, establishing them as leaders in the sustainable luxury movement. The collaboration also solidified their romantic relationship, as working together on creative projects revealed their compatibility in areas that they had never explored during their competitive academic and early professional years. They challenged each other artistically while supporting each other emotionally, creating a partnership that enhanced both their individual talents and their shared goals. Sebastian's proposal came during their second Fashion Week together, this time as official collaborators presenting a joint collection. He chose the moment just after their successful runway show, when they were both filled with the adrenaline and joy of creative achievement shared with someone who truly understood the significance of their work. The proposal incorporated elements that honored both their competitive history and their collaborative future. Sebastian had designed a ring that combined materials from both their first independent collections, symbolizing how their rivalry had evolved into a partnership that made both of them stronger and more creative. Aria's acceptance was immediate and enthusiastic, though she insisted that they wait until after Fashion Week to make any public announcements. She wanted to savor the private joy of their engagement without the distraction of media attention or industry speculation about how their marriage might affect their professional collaboration. Their wedding took place the following spring, with a ceremony that reflected both their shared commitment to sustainable practices and their love for beautiful, well-crafted design. Aria wore a dress she had designed herself, using silk from the same sustainable supplier they used for their collections, while Sebastian wore a suit crafted by a tailor who specialized in ethically produced menswear. The wedding was attended by fashion industry colleagues who had witnessed their evolution from rivals to collaborators to life partners, and many guests commented on how natural and inevitable their partnership seemed in retrospect. The couple who had once competed for the same opportunities were now creating new opportunities together. Arya and Sebastian's marriage brought additional depth to their professional collaboration, as they were able to integrate their personal values and shared life goals into their business decisions. They expanded their sustainable fashion work to include mentorship programs for young designers and advocacy for industry-wide improvements in labor practices and environmental responsibility. Their joint atelier, established 2 years after their wedding, became a model for sustainable fashion production and a training ground for designers who wanted to learn ethical production techniques. Arya and Sebastian taught classes, hosted workshops, and provided consulting services that helped other designers integrate sustainability into their work without sacrificing creativity or commercial viability. The success of their collaborative work proved that the fashion industry could indeed change for the better when talented designers committed to working together rather than just competing against each other. Arya and Sebastian became spokespeople for a new approach to fashion that emphasized collaboration, innovation, and responsibility. Their first child, a daughter they named Isabella, was born 3 years after their wedding, during a brief break between Fashion Week presentations. Isabella's arrival added new dimensions to their partnership as they worked together to balance parenting responsibilities with their demanding careers and collaborative projects. Isabella grew up in the atelier, surrounded by beautiful fabrics, sketches, and the creative energy of parents who had turned their love for each other and their craft into a business that made positive change in the world. She learned early that competition could become collaboration and that the most successful partnerships were built on mutual respect and shared values. As their reputation in sustainable fashion grew, Arya and Sebastian were invited to speak at design schools, industry conferences, and international forums on ethical business practices. They shared their story as an example of how professional rivalries could evolve into productive partnerships when people were willing to see beyond competition to possibilities for mutual success. Their message resonated particularly strongly with young designers who were entering an industry that often seemed to reward cutthroat competition over collaborative innovation. Arya and Sebastian demonstrated that supporting each other's success could lead to achievements that neither could have reached individually. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Arya and Sebastian reflected on the journey that had brought them from rivals to life partners. Standing in their atelier after hours, surrounded by designs that represented their shared vision and individual talents, they marveled at how much their relationship had transformed their work and their understanding of what success could mean. Arya realized that her years of viewing Sebastian as a rival had actually been preparation for recognizing him as the perfect partner, someone whose talents complemented her own and whose values aligned with her deepest commitments. The competition that had once frustrated her had actually been pushing both of them toward the collaboration that would define their careers and their lives. Sebastian understood that winning against Arya had never been as satisfying as working with her toward goals that neither could achieve alone. Their rivalry had been resolved not through one person defeating the other, but through both of them discovering that their greatest success would come from combining their strengths rather than comparing their individual achievements. Their love story had begun with competition and scholarship applications, but it had grown into something much more meaningful through shared work, mutual respect, and the discovery that the person who challenged you professionally might be exactly the person who could support you personally.
The fashion industry that had once seemed to pit them against each other had become the foundation for a partnership that encompassed creativity, business success, family life, and positive social impact. Arya and Sebastian had learned that the most powerful rivalries were those that evolved into the most enduring collaborations. In their atelier, late in the evening after another successful show, Arya and Sebastian continued to work side by side, sketching new designs and planning future collections. Their daughter played quietly nearby, surrounded by beautiful fabrics, sketches, and the creative energy of parents who had turned their love for each other and their craft into a business that made positive change in the world. The scene captured everything their relationship had become: creative partnership, loving marriage, committed collaboration, an ongoing conversation between two people who brought out the best in each other's work and character. They had discovered that love in the fashion industry could be measured not just in personal happiness, but in the beautiful things created together and the positive changes made possible through partnership. Aria Sinclair Cross had entered Fashion Week 7 years ago, expecting to compete with her greatest rival, but she had ended up discovering her greatest love and most important creative partner. The designer who had once represented everything she wanted to beat had become the person she wanted to build everything with, proving that sometimes the most challenging competitions were just elaborate introductions to the most perfect partnerships.